Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Replenish Earth speaker series. We've a number of experts exploring climate action in innovative and very exciting ways. Today marks the third day of London Climate Action Week, which is to drive the national and international climate policy response, prioritizing green recovery. We'll be exploring four themes: a green, fair, and resilient recovery, a roadmap to COP26, sustainable and net zero London, and whole society climate mobilization. Welcome. I'm your host, Tia Kansara, and today we have One Step Greener, an NGO that strives for a zero waste future and aims to combat pollution by working on waste management, recycling. Tree Plantations, founded by two brothers, Vihaan, who's 16, and Nav, who's 13. One Step Greener was successful in converting one household to zero waste and has since scaled to over 1,000 households. This has been achieved through innovation on a very limited budget, and they've managed to make their process self-sustaining for schools, for residential colonies and corporates who are also adopting their methodologies for waste segregation, recycling, and composting. I really want to share like a short video with you of their work. And I'm just going to give you a little bit more information shortly as well.
Ends up in the landfills, or worse, our roads, untreated and left to rot. Daily, 12,500 metric tons of garbage is produced in Delhi, out of which 4,500 metric tons lands up in the landfills and starts decomposing, causing methane and carbon dioxide to be released. In September of 2017, a fire outbreak in the Gazipur landfill costed the lives of 2 people, along with seriously polluting our air. We wanted to do something to change this. We realized this situation can be avoided and drastically reduced by taking simple steps. One step is to segregate our waste at source: to dry waste, kitchen waste, and hazardous and sanitary waste. Dry waste can be segregated further. All sorts of paper, including shredded paper, can be recycled to save 75% of already existing resources. Metals, including cans, can be cleaned and recycled, saving 95% of the required energy. 5 categories of plastic can be recycled and given a new life. Similarly, with cardboard, we can flatten it and keep them for further use. E-waste can be sorted and responsibly recycled as well. Glass items such as bottles and even broken glass can be recycled. To do this, selling to a certified recycler can greatly reduce the risks associated with leakage, who also will send it to manufacturers directly for reprocessing.
Hello to both of you. Welcome to the Replenish Earth Live. This is so exciting to have you both. How are you doing?
We're doing well. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when we think about climate action, we don't think in terms of age, but when we have, you know, such young, incredible pioneers that are working on, you know, such a prestigious topic, it's important for us to recognize the work that you're doing and seeing it and hearing it from your words of, how has the journey been? And I'm sure there's loads and loads and loads of questions that the audience has for you. So audience, please share your comments, suggestions and questions in the comment section, and we'll have a chance at the end to ask Vihaan and Nav questions. So yes, without further ado, when we think about One Step Greener, we think about the number of things that you've done. So far you've recycled over, is it 108,000 kilograms of waste, including more than 40,000 kilograms of paper, almost 20,000 kilograms of cardboard, 10,000 kilograms of plastic. These are sort of like massive numbers, even in terms of saving plants or planting plants, 3,000-ish plants that you've both planted. You've been the kind of reforestation drives that you've got have been really inspiring. You've planted something like 25 different varieties of native trees. And I think, when we look at these sorts of figures and understand the kind of work that you've achieved, we often wonder what triggered you. What was it that started this journey? How did it all begin? So tell us, how did it start?
So basically what happened was in September 2017, the Ghazipur landfill, basically a landfill is where all of your waste ends up after, it doesn't really go to a recycler in India. It goes up to these huge mountains of waste. And there's a landfill called the Ghazipur landfill in India, and it actually caught on fire in September 2017, collapsed and killed 2 people. And it came in the newspaper, and that's when we made the connection between air pollution and waste.
So I think from the very beginning, we've both been passionate wildlife lovers. We've been avid bird watchers. We love going to wildlife areas, and we've seen a number of problems already that were existing before 2017 in Delhi. So like with cleanliness, the lack of trees, etc. And the way we were taught, and also of course air pollution, right? So the way we were taught in school was that the one way to fix air pollution is tree plantations. But the problem arose that one, there has to be funds to plant trees. 2, there has to be space to plant trees, and that's the biggest question of them all, the space. Because in Delhi, because there's so many people, there are 20 million people living in that city, there is no space to plant trees. So we really felt powerless to do anything to really solve this problem. But when we saw this in the news article, as Nav said, and you probably saw in the video as well, the connection was made for us that trash can also contribute to air pollution. And that's when we started segregating our waste at home. And essentially the thought process was that our waste should not end up in the landfill and become fodder for this fire, essentially.
Also, the way that air pollution is getting created by air pollution is because of the decomposing of waste and the burning of waste. Also, I would like to add that more than 30% of Delhi's air pollution is directly contributed by waste. And Delhi is the most polluted city in the world.
So, yeah, it really just shows you the magnitude of the problem.
I think one of those things that, when we're going into Delhi and we're sort of like transiting or whatever, it's the first response is, wow, there's so much smog, and it's got a very specific smell. And Ahmedabad's got this issue because, between Mumbai, Ahmedabad and, Delhi, we've pretty much got all 3 of the largest landfill sites that, the whole of India has. I mean, those that we are actually aware of. And I think what's really fascinating is that, something's got to trigger us. And, when in 2015, I was doing a project with SEPT on the 100 smart cities, and I happened to be going through National Institute of Design. And, I was introduced to Mudita and Ishita, who were alumna there. And the 3 of us sort of sat there having a tea at Chai Gate. And as we're sitting sipping our chai, we were like, wow, this is really intense that our visual inspiration when you walk down the street in India is actually a pile of rubbish on the street. And, further moment when you're walking through the streets of India and, or, let's say you've taken a rickshaw and you're on your journey, there's a moment that really triggered that kind of waste, appreciation for the visuals of waste in our daily lives, in terms of the question of where we hide our waste. And I think what's really fascinating in India is that we don't hide our waste. And if we did, we'd put it into very specific places, right? Like we'd put it into a dustbin, or we put it onto, a pile that was then to be organized or sorted. So lots and lots of questions coming up. But one of the big things was, for me, particularly when a cow picked up a plastic bag and there was some kind of food inside the plastic bag. So it was like munching through the plastic bag to get to the food. And I was like, wait, stop, to the rickshaw driver. And he was like, what does this crazy lady want? And then jumped off the rickshaw, and I was like trying to pull the plastic bag out of the mouth of the cow. And the cow was like, lady, stop disturbing my breakfast. And I was like, looked around, and there was just like an entire pile of rubbish. And the cow was just like, babes, this is my food. And it just triggered me in a way that I wanted to help. I just didn't know how. Do we clean this up? Do we make sure that this is not visible to you so that you don't eat it? Why is there plastic in the, on the street? When it comes to the actual infrastructure of the city, how can we ensure that the infrastructure is managed well so that there is a process that we are part of? But then the question comes back to, is the process enough?
So I think one really interesting thing that when I was doing a little bit of policy research also into the waste management side was how people actually being paid to take waste to the landfill. So it's not, we're just dumping waste in the landfill. It's that it's economically viable to dump waste in the landfill rather than take care of it by recycling, etc. So, that really poses a question as to why is that policy actually existing? And that's also a big reason why we created our particular model, which is also economically viable and also benefits everyone economically as well. So, you don't need to do that, really.
I think the, coming back to your story and the things that trigger you when, who was it? I think one of our prime ministers was in India. Theresa May was in India, and there was a really strange statistic that came out that every hour that she spends in the air of Delhi reduces her lifespan by a certain amount. And it was interesting because when we think about air pollution, we don't see the immediate impacts on our health. It's sort of like smoking, the kind of like chemicals that are used in industry and then exposed into the atmosphere that people are then breathing, can correlate to a number of respiratory illnesses or issues that happen in our bodies. And it's interesting that those figures are almost not seen as an immediate, correlation or relationship. We kind of put something outside and we don't think twice about it being that relationship back to our health, that the return of our invested waste on the streets being a return on a negative health. So do you think people are actually aware of the impact on their bodies, or do you think it's happening so slowly that it's not obvious?
So I think a lot of people in Delhi do not. I think some of them know the impact and some of them see it firsthand. Like Vihaan has asthma and he's very sensitive to air pollution and other things like that.
Yeah, so I think definitely people do see the impact. Like Nav said that I'm asthmatic. That was the impact. That direct impact was there for both of us to really do something about it. And then, of course, we had our trigger moment. But I think a lot of people in Delhi are asthmatic as well. So that is one area where a lot of families at least see the impact. Obviously, the people who have asthma, but then again, like Nav, a lot of families do as well. So there is definitely that. But then there's the third thing, and especially right now, sadly enough, because of COVID, the number of deaths in Delhi has increased, and because of the air pollution. So right now, the air pollution is spiked because it's post Diwali, and the COVID deaths have also spiked along with them. So a lot of people are seeing the impact. Plus, everyone talks about air pollution in Delhi, so it's not like you're unaware of it completely. yes, for a lot of people, it isn't an issue that they think is pertinent. A lot of people think other issues are more important in their life, like getting food, or getting water, or any of the other things, or education for that matter. So I think, yes, people are aware, but the willingness to do something about it, I doubt that, unless it's given to them on a silver platter, which is what we aim to do.
I think one of the things that people were talking about was if you could see the Himalayas from Delhi. Was that true? Could you actually see the Himalayas from, like, there was this sort of, there's the mountain ranges that people could actually see from the clarity of being able to.
I'm not sure if that's true, but even if it was, it would be around 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Because
Also,
it's so you can't even see stars in Delhi. So
yeah,
since we were born, we weren't able to see stars in Delhi. When we look up, we can't see any stars. I think we can only see Mars, and that's about it.
And that also faintly, and on a very clear sky, a clear day. But I think the news article that you must have read about the mountain ranges was from Chandigarh, and that turned out to be false as well, because the pollution hit.
What a bummer. Like, this sort of like, sensational information that, wow, you can even see the Himalayas. It's interesting. We've got Noura, who's just posted a comment that I'd love to share with you. And that is, do you think Indians have become too used to seeing and experiencing this pollution and ugliness and visual of like rubbish on the streets that it's difficult to overcome? It's difficult to overcome that sort of perspective because it's like, it's so normal.
I think I don't necessarily agree with that it's so normalized. In fact, everyone in Delhi, in India for that matter, we have, culturally, we are very clean people. At least we like to think we are, right? So if you go to anyone's house, it'll be the cleanest place ever, right? It's even cleaner than a hospital. But that same cleanliness is not carried on to the street, right? Because if it's out of mind, it's out of sight. If it's out of sight, it's out of mind, right? So I think also for people who do see it, it may make a little bit of an impact. But again, like I said earlier, that a lot of people have other problems, other things that they feel is more pertinent to their lives, even though air pollution is killing them slowly, and the dirtiness, etc. So really, awareness is lacking, and I think people don't really see it as a problem that's worth investing time into and cleaning up. So
I mean,
I think
normally a lot of people who actually start doing something is when they see it firsthand. Not even if they see like a friend or a friend's friend has asthma. If someone has asthma or a health related problem, or say his lungs or her lung gets because of the pollution, it gets it gets weaker. It gets weaker, and then they get COVID-19, and they have a lot of health problems. So I think a lot of people, when they see it firsthand, is when they actually wanting to do something about it. And that's still a very small percentage. It's not majority of the population in India. So
I think it's more of like generally cleanliness. We are like, there is a culture of cleanliness inside the home, but it's really bringing that culture outside as well, because when that does come outside, then you automatically see the change.
It's kind of like, there was an interesting part of my research looking at transition spaces and that which is ultimately private and that which is ultimately public. And you have these spaces in between, right? The space in between is that transitioning between the private and public that has like an increasing ratio of that which becomes like this semi-public would be, areas in your building block, that you could walk through, the public could walk through, but that somebody lives around here somewhere, right? Like, that this is like someone's front garden, for example, or the front of someone's street. And And then you've got these semi-private areas, so semi-public, semi-private areas where, you know, the ownership and management of these is always quite questionable. You know, you don't really know who looks after this space or that space. And, you know, you could have like service charges in the actual building serviced by the entire building, right? Because you know, that it's not private, but it's more like a semi-private space. So within these transitions is the opportunity to identify whose responsibility and ownership it is to manage those spaces. And I think what's intriguing is obviously segregation at source, or, you know, the purchasing of things that don't have these kinds of wasteful, you know, items built in, designed into them, so that, you know, you don't pick that up and think, well, what do I do with this? You know, purchasing it right, so that when you bring it into your home, the full responsibility lies with you. Often when we purchase something, we bring it home and sort of like, you know, the only time that we're responsible is from the time of purchase to the time that it goes into, you know, a recycling box, right? Like, or whatever, compost, or you know, a device that we're using, whatever that is. But that the ownership of that is only from there to there. And what we're actually doing is extending that, so it goes not only from the date of purchase, from the date of manufacture, from the date of even thinking about it, to like all the way, like, you know, how can you be thinking in terms of the entire holistic nature of something that you purchase, so that, yes, there are ways that we can recycle and do something to kind of like clean up the mess, but it's less about cleaning up the mess and maybe not making it in the first place. So, you know, bringing people's attention to, you know, you still have responsibility when you're purchasing something to not, you know, to not have that end of life being such a mess, or in that semi-public space, the no-go area, that unspeakable area where it's like, I don't really know what to do with this. So you'll see, you know, people sort of like got a broom and like quickly broom up their home every day, early morning. You'll see everybody doing that. And then it's like a little pile. I don't know who's going to look after this. And then it's just like outside the home, because that's like the public area, right? So somebody else is in charge of public. So there is a sort of like private public division that requires a little bit of a reframe. In Japan, they've got something called Rentai Sekkinin, which is this community drive. It starts at school, because I used to teach English in high schools, and everybody, right at the end of the school, somehow there's like this big mob, which is like the entire school turns into a cleaning mob. Everybody gets their dustpans, brushes, mops. Everyone's got, you know, dusters and everything. And all of a sudden, everyone turns into a maid, the maid of the school. And they're like, you know, everything's being clean. And they're kind of like looking at me thinking, Tia Sensei, are you not going to take your responsibility? I'm like, give me something. Like, okay. And then all of a sudden, I've got like a little something that I've got responsibility over. But this Rentai Sekkinin is effectively this responsibility going beyond the self into the communal responsibility. So it starts at school, kids really young doing this like cleaning adventure, and then they get to adulthood and it still continues. So you still have these like cleaning parties every month. Everybody gets out on the streets. It doesn't matter how old you are. And everybody goes and cleans up the entire building block or semi-private, semi-public spaces into the public spaces as well. So it's a really interesting division and relationship between what's owned, right? Like owning that space, owning that responsibility. So I wonder, you know, just in the back of my head, I wonder what something like this would look like in Delhi, where, you know, the association is that, you know, we've paid for the cleaning of our home and that's it, we're done.
All right. So I think just like two things that you've touched upon is one, how do you show people the life cycle of waste? So I think what we've done is, one, through our education processes, that there is a circular economy that you can create where the same waste that you're giving can turn into a product that you're using, right? And we've tried to educate people on that first and foremost. Secondly, we've shown people that. So a lot of the products that we have, like we have a box and we have a bag, I think you saw it in the video as well, those products are made of recycled material that we get. So like, for example, the box has reinforced cardboard. So it's plastic, cardboard, and paper, all combined, recycled materials that people are using in their homes to segregate their waste, right? and then we have the bag made of recycled plastic as well. So what that really shows people is that, look, this is the fruit of my labor. And that's when it really clicks that, okay, waste is not only the things I'm throwing into the dustbin. And in India, it's not like recycle bin and composting. The thought process is very much put it in the trash and then it's out of sight, right? And it's out of mind, right? So it's transitioning from that to putting it into the one step greener box, like we call it, and then putting it in the composting, and then really thinking about the whole process till the one step greener box comes back to you, or the one step greener bag.
So what Vihaan is saying is that after the thing that people have to do is that they have to keep their waste. And I think Vihaan forgot to mention this point, and I'm going to bring it up later. It's that when the thing that people do is first they take out their plastic, cardboards, whatever, they put it in their cardboard box and they put it in their bag. After they do that, we actually come to their home, and according to the amount of waste they give us, we actually pay them. Now, because this hasn't been such of a thing that it's out of our sight, it's out of our mind, we're trying to break that, and we're trying to give an incentive for people to recycle, to segregate, and then they can see their own impact. Because if you're keeping the waste inside your home and you're seeing the amount of waste you're actually producing, you would want to reduce it. And we've seen by how much waste we pick up per household, the amount of waste we keep on picking up gets lower and lower, which is very good. And also because of that,
I think that's the thing though, right? Like, how do you take agency? Ultimately, it's how do you take ownership over a process that hasn't been yours? Like, our responsibility is to buy something and it's to put it in the dustbin. That is the process, right? That's the step. There's only one step there. It's purchase, do what you want, doesn't really matter where anything comes from, and then put it into the dustbin. Doesn't matter whatever it is that you purchase, it has no, don't worry about it. It's too complex. Put it into one thing, right? So it's like this, we've got a process that is so simplified that the ultimate complexity lies on the outer edges. The complexity of making sure that the actual item has the supply chain that's necessary, and to make sure that the infrastructure that then takes that, the trash away, is also some level of complexity in terms of, segregating it and trying to figure out what to do once we've made the mess, and how do you separate all of this stuff. Just because something is soiled, now you can't recycle it. If you've got yogurt all over the actual yogurt pot, that doesn't allow you to just recycle the plastic straight away. You've got to clean it out. So it's almost as if one step greener is making sure that at least on the part of, ensuring the complexity of the end of life means that end of life of the item has one step at a time of breaking down the complexity and bringing it back into the ownership of the person that's making that decision.
So I think two things I'd like to say about that was, one is that we really pride ourselves as being a community organization, right? An organization that is for the community, by the community. And how do we do that is, one, obviously we're part of the community, right? We're part of Delhi. So being citizens and being young people, it really does tell people that, we are part of the community. The second way we do that is through our area leads. So in the colonies and the neighborhoods we work in, we have one member of that community act as the head of that community for us, right? So that means that all our communication goes through them, and all the the community's messaging goes back.
So you've got like a two-way sort of relay.
Exactly. Yeah. So for the community, it's not talking to a stranger, it's talking to one of their own. And for us also, it's something like that as well. So I think that's the community aspect. And then another thing is that we really we're trying to create a system that improves on mistakes that even Western countries have made. Like you mentioned about the yogurt scenario, where you have soil stuff that goes into recycling, and in some countries 30% of the recyclables that actually end up in the recycling bin don't end up getting recycled. So what we've tried to do with that is, from the get-go, we educate people that we're not going to pick up your waste if it isn't cleaned. So because of that, what it ensures is that right now we have 100% recycling rate in our warehouse. So all the waste that comes in is recycled. So it's not really soil waste coming. It's very, very little soil waste. So
But it's
if we're
also
picking,
you're educating people on what your expectations are. By sharing those expectations, you're also able to shift the system itself to favor what needs to happen next. And I think, when it comes to the greater problem that you've been solving, there are some solutions that have emerged, right? Do you want to share some of those with us?
yeah, so I think Nav can take you through the whole process once about what exactly we do. I think everyone's a little confused, but I think Nav can really take us.
So we have a three-part we have a lot of steps. So the first step is engagement and community understanding. We're going to teach people how to segregate the waste, and more importantly, the importance of waste segregation. After that, we're going to ask them if they want to sign in with us, and we will come to their home, we'll pick up their waste, and as I said earlier, we'll pay them for the waste, and after that, we take it to our warehouse where we'll micro-segregate it. And after we micro-segregated
just one thing. So micro-segregating basically means, like, for example, you have segregated paper, plastic, cardboard, right? And then that's what you give us. We basically take the paper and sort it into 4 different categories. So we have shredded paper, we have A4 size paper, A3 size paper, shredded paper, etc., etc. So that's what paper. And then in cardboard, for example, you put, like, for example, a tissue box, right? The outside of a tissue box, or like a toilet roll, the cardboard part of the toilet roll, that isn't really cardboard. That's called paperboard. So that's something separate. So we segregate that as well. Then cardboard, we segregate it into, like, bigger sizes, smaller sizes, etc. And for plastic, there are 50 different types of plastic. So we have HDPE, SDPE, the different types. So we have to segregate it in that. Then only manufacturers take it. And
so basically, it's not like so manufacturers only take waste in huge quantities. So what we're doing is essentially we're taking waste from a lot of households, and when we get the required quantity to sell it to those recyclers, we then send it to those particular recyclers who have certification from the government, etc. And then they recycle it and reprocess it, and that gets made back into the product which you were going to buy, which you just send for segregation.
So another clarification in terms of recyclers is that we don't sell to recyclers, but manufacturers who use recyclable materials in their processes. So that, like, I think you saw in the video as well, that removes the need of using virgin resources in those processes.
You mentioned that you have like a 3-part process. Is that basically how it all emerged?
So this is the first part of our 3-part process, which is our waste management. Second part is obviously the education aspect of it. So we have a school curriculum that we're creating. We have a school program so that children get to know about waste from the get-go and have a practical experience of segregating waste as well. Then we do talks like this and presentations. So
we do a lot of other stuff as well, like
social media, and our website, etc. So that's the education aspect. And the third part, I think Nav can take you through, is our tree plantation.
So the third part, plantations, is basically we realize that obviously even our school told us that the main way to combat air pollution is through tree plantations. So what we did was we started planting trees in a Miyawaki style forest. That's what we tried to do. That's what we intend to do.
For our viewers who may not know what the Miyazaki method is, can you give a few lines on that?
So Miyawaki style forest is a forest where we plant trees close to each other, so the biodiversity really increases in that particular place. And we're just trying to create hotspots in cities we're trying to create biodiversity hotspots in urban places. And this is basically urban afforestation, which we've been doing. Last year we planted 250 trees in a
300
300 trees in a Miyawaki style forest, and every single tree has survived. They've had 100% survival rate. We take care of the trees for 3 years. We plant them, we water them. The daily upkeep of them, keeping a fence around them. Say one tree's branch came off or something, then we'll have to get bamboo for it, etc. So
And also this year we planted 700 trees. Though because of COVID, there have been maintenance issues, so we haven't been able to reach the 100% survival rate. But we're aiming to reach that as fast as possible. Also, Nav forgot to mention was that we plant only native trees. So as you mentioned as well, 24 different species of native trees and indigenous trees is what we plant, because it's very easy to just plant say an exotic variety that requires less water, requires less manure. But we were very particular about the native trees, not only because it's important for the soil, it's important that exotic species don't spread around, but also because of the biodiversity. As Nav said, we're trying to create biodiversity hotspots, and through the plantation what we're trying to do is we plant shrubs, then medium height trees, and then tall trees, to create like a tiered plantation, so the amount of biodiversity is increased. And in our previous plantation we've seen all the way from butterflies to birds to even like snakes and mongoose, a couple of mongoose roaming around. So in the middle of the city, if you're able to create a green spot, I think that's been really great.
I think that's such a beautiful way of encouraging biodiversity into our lives, because we've almost become quite, grey in our designs. Like, when you look at much of the city experience that people have, these cities are actually moving away from wildlife and wild nature to very specifically designed rectangular spots called parks with very particularly planted equidistant apart trees. That this sort of relationship with the wild has been somewhat disturbed. So introducing that back in and bringing that biodiversity back in is really important. I remember, I think it was about 2010, University College London was running this campaign for greening the city, and the main reason for that was the drop in the number of bees that were in a city. And of course, bees are required for, and many others, as pollinators. And so how might we encourage more pollination within the city? If there is a reduction of these bees, it's kind of the end of humanity as we know it, because we sort of rely on this pollination process. So of course, encouraging more greening of the city is one aspect, one way, not only of making it visual, like coming back to that the visual inspiration of rubbish, right? Like the continued sort of like power of that. I think it'd be really good to show a video on this for the actual trees. If you could share that, that'd be fantastic. And I think, also, as soon as you share your video, it's going to come up and then I can share it on the screen. I think one of the key sort of areas I think we've been thinking quite a bit about is, how can we encourage cities and citizens to have this relationship with nature? And this is exactly it. So I'm going to put it onto the screen. There we go.
So this is when we were planting the 250 trees last year, and
300.
so 300 trees last year, and as you can see, they're really small. And right now they're like 15 feet, and they're huge, and it's just completely packed with trees. And it's been and it's also very good because the community had planted them. The community had cleaned that whole place up. There's a lot of plastic and other things over there. And on top of that, the community had come and they had planted the trees. So there's still a connect between the community and the trees. So we see a lot of them just coming there and looking at the trees and seeing they've grown so tall, and we've seen a lot of them water the trees even though we do, and it's just a great experience.
Yeah. So I think another thing you talked about was community, and this tree plantation. Luckily enough, we got land inside the main, like in our community where we service about 200 homes. So we actually got 40 to 50 people who came out not only for the tree plantation, as you saw in the video, but also, like Nav said, for cleaning the area, which we were thinking we would be the only ones there, because it's literally picking up glass and all kinds of waste on your road. So yeah, that was absolutely amazing, and we've really tried to bring the community in as much as possible so that they feel the process is their own and don't feel someone else is doing it for them.
I think that's the sort of the transition between this is your issue and this is our issue, right? This is yours, sorry, you're going to clean that up, to this is ours, that's in front of my house. And there's something that makes this topic untouchable. What do you think that is? What's that sort of the disgust that we have towards this, I suppose?
So I think one, obviously, it's waste we're really talking about. We're not talking about something pleasant as tree plantations, but waste inevitably has a negative connotation in a lot of people's minds. And obviously, we've tried to change that. But also in India, there has been kind of a stereotypical approach to waste, where it's out of mind, it's out of sight. But also historically, even the lowest strata of society was supposed to take care of waste, really.
And
So the people who do manage waste right now are heavily prejudiced against. So the Kurawalas, etc. And we've tried to bring them into our organization. So we've hired them into our organization. We've given them a decent wage, because they were in the informal sector, so they're not
they were getting paid. They were not even getting paid minimum wage. They were getting paid really, really, really low amounts, and they were not treated correctly. A lot of people, the kind of ways they were stereotyped was crazy. It was that it was like, I didn't even believe it. People couldn't even look at them, and not all, but some people. It's become very, very. It's become way better now, but historically, and these people have don't even get minimum wage. So we really wanted them to come to our organization, and we paid them a decent amount. They have a dignified job right now. They're wearing gloves. They're having all of the other accommodations, etc., which we've looked into. So we've also done that.
Also, what was surprising to both of us was that they didn't have bank accounts, right? And that's something so normal for everyone in the Western world, and especially people who are privileged, is to have a bank account was such a big deal for them that they couldn't believe it when we actually created a bank account, because that is something that we instituted, that whoever we hire as part has to have a bank account, right? So it really was surprising to us. And also, like we mentioned, gloves and a mask, these bare necessities that you would expect everyone to have, they didn't even have that. They were literally scavenging through waste with their own hands. So
and these aren't just adults in landfill sites. As in the video we saw earlier, that there was a landfill which we had gone to, and we could see small children, I think 5 to 8 years old, and they were sitting there and they were picking out their waste with their parents or with their relatives, and they were picking out and sorting the waste, and then they were selling it to the informal sector.
So I think we've tried to not do away with that completely, because there is their livelihood. We've tried to bring them into the fold so that their children can focus on studying instead of doing that, right? So yeah, it's really been quite interesting to see all of that.
Have you ever got any kind of pushback, like people saying, well, this is just not our responsibility, or who the hell are you to tell me what to do, or, oh, you're doing it for this reason and you just want to be famous and all that, like people who use obviously the opportunity to not do it themselves?
Yeah. So
Right.
I think not too much of a pushback, because in my opinion, if we didn't really have the incentive, I'm pretty sure we would have got a lot of pushback. But because we're still providing the incentive, at least we've not got too much pushback.
I think very limited pushback, to be honest. We've hardly, from the people we've reached out to, we've got pushback. There have been some problems when we've reduced the rate of paying for the waste, when the rates go down over the world. But other than that, it's always been something minor. Anything minutely, in my opinion, a little major, was that a lot of people thought at least that we were doing it for college or our college
College?
application.
What do you mean by college? Like university applications?
Exactly. So a lot of our friends, etc., thought it was for our college applications.
And the funny part is that we actually started before we started at I started when I was 10, and at that time I
Well,
didn't
you were
even
really thinking about university at the age of 10.
still not thinking about college. He was my age when we started this, and obviously he wouldn't be thinking about college. And that connect, I don't get where it, but it does come from somewhere. And
Oh, that's funny.
A lot of people, it was their own insecurity of not
Yeah,
doing anything.
totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Trying,
Absolutely.
once they ran out of excuses, it was the most absurd things that
Oh, no,
started
no, no.
coming.
Like you're obviously doing it because you want, this award and
Yeah.
that award, and you're doing it because of, it's because you don't have purpose, right? You don't have purpose. You're doing it for commercial reasons. And I think what's really fascinating in generating income for others and generating, economic value for others that they didn't have before, or generating ecosystem value where it wasn't before, generating, a full system perspective on what you're doing is absolutely incredible and important to have, and I commend you on that. I feel that as a person myself who has spent years thinking about how to transform cities, how to transform the environment, how to transform businesses and systems, what you're doing is a whole system approach. There's the kind of encouragement that I think everyone can give you is to get involved. So how can people help you scale? How can governments help you scale? How can companies help you scale? Like, what are you asking for? What's your big ask?
So I think one would be obviously funds, because though in our whole process, we don't require any funds because we made it kind of self-sustaining.
Brilliant. Not a charity.
To expand to new colonies, to expand to new areas, we do need those funds. We need to some months we'll have to lose money over there so that we can reach as many people as possible, to advertise to people, to really grab their attention. We do need funds, and for our tree plantations, of course, we need funds, because that completely runs on donations.
Second thing, I would want you to, the best thing would be to volunteer your time. It doesn't matter if you're in India or you're across the world. The only thing we need from you is that if you could volunteer your time with us. So we have a Google form which you can film on our website, and you can, help us with scaling up or researching or, making social media stuff. And it's the best thing if you could just volunteer your time, and I think that would mean a lot to us.
Right.
Yeah, I'm also going to add, it's incredibly inspiring having that, the work that you're doing continue beyond what you're doing, and also to start building bridges across the world for people who are doing the same thing. I think there's an incredibly large community of people that are interested in planting trees, whether it is in supporting you financially, technologically, or with labor, with their time, with their efforts, with their brains. So there's a huge amount that can be done here. And to scale what you're achieving right now, imagine if the whole of India was already working on this. Some of the most polluted rivers of the world are coming, and much of the pollution that's coming into, the oceans around India are from the rivers, and how that sort of the waste sort of moves from the city shorelines or the kind of docks directly into the ocean and impacts our ocean. So, segregating at source, understanding what it means to be one step greener is an important part of the climate action strategy that we can take personally. And this is not just, a professional thing. This is a personal thing, right? It's what we're doing daily, thinking about this and encouraging ourselves to actually really be part of this community. So that's what you're doing. You're encouraging us to be, together with you on this. And thank you for doing that. What would you say is really, reinforcing what you're doing? Like, what inspires you to continue so that we know that we can help support you?
So one thing which really inspires us and motivates us is, just seeing, it's like, we've been nominated for a lot of prizes, and one particular prize is the Children's Climate Prize, and it's a very prestigious prize, and we actually won that award, and that really motivated us and inspired us to, go on, and it told us that this Children's Climate Prize came from Sweden, and Sweden's the gold standard, and it told us that if Sweden's looking at your work and saying that it's good. So just keep on going, and don't stop.
And I think more than the prizes, at least for both of us, is the impact, seeing the impact that we've made. Like you mentioned, 108,000 kilograms. 108,000. Kilograms of waste we recycled. Now we are constantly monitoring it, and now in the past week it's risen to 115,000 kilograms of waste.
And just by doing those things, we've been able to save 1.4 million liters of water. This is all the virgin resources. Then 3,159 trees which we've been saved or planted. And on top of that, we've generated enough energy to power 89,000 Indian homes for a whole day. And on top of that, we sequestered 91,000 pounds of carbon, there's some countries, Tuvalu and a couple of others, if you add all of the amount of carbon they produce, it's still 61,000 pounds less than the amount of pounds of carbon we sequestered. So
I'm really excited because I want to be part of this. And one of our strategies at Replenish Earth is really to take things personally. So we've got a number of different ways that people can get involved, and of course they can get in contact with you. But I'd love to know from the audience, what small actions can you take away from today's talk, from the challenges and the opportunities that both Vihaan and Nav have been sharing with you? Like, what are you going to be taking away? And I'm quite curious about, understanding where the audience is going to be encouraged. You're going to be encouraged to take this, and what, the statistics are one thing, but recognizing that you've got to start somewhere. There are triggers, and whether it is air pollution in the environment, or whether you've got asthma and you're wondering why in the hell do I have, these sorts of respiratory illnesses. But, everything happens in our environment, whether we're indoors from lockdown or whether we're outdoors from curfews. The relationship that we have with the outdoors and our visual inspiration of that which exists surrounding us is such an important trigger for us. And understanding that process of complexity needs to be simplified on both edges of our purchasing behaviors. So, some parting thoughts from both of you and some encouragement from our audience would be lovely.
I think one thing that I can definitely tell you is that even if you don't live in India and you don't have access to these processes, the processes you do have, use them to the best ability that you can. So, clean that yogurt container, or, use a metal water bottle. Don't use plastic in the first place. Or, start taking, bucket showers instead of taking a shower with, the actual shower thing. So, these little things that you can change in your everyday behavior do end up counting. So even in our home, we've gone zero waste by taking care of our wet waste, by composting it, which is such an easy process. So in a month, you have fresh manure that you can use anywhere. And on the other hand, dry waste, you just, if you have a recycling company coming to your home, to give them the easiest possible process, because that saves them money, so they can recycle even more, right? So that is definitely something you can do. And start researching and trying to find where exactly the things you don't, like for example, waste, you don't know where it goes. Try and find out, where does your waste go? Or something else for that matter, that you have no idea where it goes, find out its end, and try to improve it, and you'll get inspiration from absolutely everything. And I think the best inspiration comes from the wild, so just go to the wild whenever you can.
Other than that, I would just say that other than those small changes which do make a big impact, other than that, if you want to start anything, just find something you're passionate about and which is good for the environment or good for the community, and just go ahead and do it.
And not think about it too much, because if you do think about it, you'll find 1,000 excuses not to do it.
Oh, it's been an absolute delight to have the both of you, not only to share your wins and your awards and the fantastic work and impact that you've had, but also by understanding what drives you, what's difficult, what's challenging. Some of the scaling of the work that we do is based on our challenges to overcome the obstacles that we have in our environments. And for me, you've overcome those obstacles and found a solution that is not something that just needs to be recycled, but something that can be generative, financially generative, emotionally generative. It gives people so much hope and inspiration in what you're doing. So I'm so glad that we had the chance to share your story on the Replenish Earth live series, because these kind of small actions, these kind of, community drives and initiatives, whether you're in India, whether you're in London, whether you're in Birmingham, it doesn't really matter where you are. We have the same challenge. And I think that globalized network of consumerism has given us the opportunity to rise to this challenge.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much to both of you. And if there's any way that we can help, please let us know. The audience is ready. And that is your handle to get in contact with you directly. But there's also your website, which has all of the information there. Any final notes?
If you want to contact us, you can email us info@onestepgreener.org. And if you want to message us, you can message us on our Instagram, which is @onestep_greener. And
yeah, fantastic. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all very, very much. Replenish Earth starts with the smallest of actions, and you can become a replenisher too. Participate in today's Rise to Replenish Challenge and join this momentum. Today's theme for our Rise to Replenish Challenge is digital detox. By taking time away from your digital devices, today I pledge to reduce my dependency on devices. So I'm actually going to reduce my energy consumption, switch all of my devices off after this, up until that next live that I've got. So please join and engage and interact with our social media posts, where you can find out more of the different kinds of actions and small steps that you can take, very similar to this One Step Greener initiative, to take that challenge in being one step greener every single day. So without further ado, please transform your lives and invite climate action into your lives.